Welcome guys to another tier list of all the pilots in Code Geass Lost Stories global release for December 2023, and I pray to God this is the only take I have to do to say that entire mess because oh my god. Anyways, before we begin, I'm going to go over all the rankings that I've created, and like every other tier list I've done, I keep changing stuff, which is why I'm doing it. So let's do that real quick. First we have is the S tier, and I called it Halloween Lelouch. These are the best characters in the game, staples, belong on basically every single team, or they're just super OP. So I figured, hey, S tier makes sense, and Halloween Lelouch is so broken. We just got him, so I think naming the tier after him was super appropriate. Then we have the A tier, semi-stable slash power faction support. So what I've decided to do here is make this tier not just for really good characters that are not necessarily the best in the game, but close enough, but also the really good faction support pilots, because in my previous tier list, I keep putting characters like Taizo and Rakshata pretty low on the tiers when they're actually really good pilots. So limiting them by their faction just isn't fair to me, hence why they're part of now the A category. Then we have the B tier, which is still solid substitutes, just like the name implies. These are pilots, they're not the best in the game, but you can use them if you don't have the best pilots in the game. Then we have the Schneizel tier. The Schneizel tier is the low tier essentially of the faction specific characters, where they're not terrible, but they're only good in their faction. Unlike say Rakshata and Taizo, who are really OP, these characters are not that broken, so we have the Schneizel tier. The reason why I called it Schneizel is because he is the quintessential character who fulfills this criteria, so obviously the tier should be named after him. Okay, next we have is the D tier, which is recently power crept. These are characters that, as the name suggests, were recently power crept. I might just change it to power creep and get rid of the recently part. We'll see how this goes, but essentially these are characters that are not bad, but there are so many better pilots that have come out since that they're just not that great anymore. Definitely use them if you have nothing else, but yeah, it's kind of sad, but as they say, the mighty have fallen.
No one
Who
says
says
that.
that?
So D tier belongs to the characters that were once really good, but now, not so much. Next we have is the E tier, which is niche use only. These are characters that, as the name suggests, are really good, but only in very specific situations, so niche use only. Some of these could go in the garbage tier, but they do have their uses, so I think niche use only would be appropriate. Next we have is the F tier, which is not worth it. Basically, pilots that are in theory pretty good, but I don't think it's worth your effort to level them up when there are better options available to you, which is why again I think the F tier is appropriate. Does that mean you shouldn't use them or level them up? Yeah, definitely go for it. Just keep in mind that there are better pilots in the game right now and will be in the future that'll easily power creep the characters that are in this tier list. So again, not awful, but
it's not worth it.
and last, and certainly not least to some extent, is the G tier, which is Tamaki. These are the worst pilots in the game. Don't use them, don't level them up aside from training mode. They're not good. Maybe in certain niche situations, but 99.9% of the time, they are complete garbage, so don't use them. Now that that's out of the way, let's start going over each pilot, starting with Ashford Lelouch, which I'm going to put him in the A tier. That's right. He is no longer in the S tier. We just have too many better options, but still a very powerful pilot, has the ability to stun on deployment, fast redeployment time, and really good attack stats. So overall really good, but just again, we've just gotten so much awesome stuff in the last couple of banners that he's just not there anymore. Moving on, we have is C2, and man, this is really difficult. I'm going to put her in niche use only. Now, yes, she has pretty good attack stats, and the barriers are something you could use often on every single team, but most of the time you don't need her except for really hard missions, so hence why it's niche use only. But I know a lot of people swear by this character, and I completely understand why. Moving on, we have Kallen. I'm going to put her in the budget substitute, and she's substituting for, of course, Bismarck, Cornelia, and other powerful attackers like that. She still has really good stats, but her abilities pale in comparison to the pilots I just mentioned, so if you got nothing else, I suppose you could use her because she does have really good base stats. She still combos well with the Gurren, of course, but just keep in mind, there are better options. Moving on, we have is Ohgi. Sorry, that's Rakshata, my bad. Ohgi, the first one, and yeah, garbage. He's just not good. Don't use him. Next, we have is a second Ohgi, and not worth it. I don't want to say garbage because he does have some use in boosting the nightmare frames that are part, well, the pilots rather, that are part of the Black Knight faction, but he's just not good enough to even be in the Schneizel tier. He's not worth it, man. Just don't waste your resources on him. It's like teetering between niche use only and not worth it. I just think not worth it is appropriate for him. And obviously Ohgi sucks, so that kind of helps too. Next we have is Tamaki, and of course he goes in his own section. Just god awful. Yeah, he's a cost increaser for the Black Knight faction, but man, that only comes up in very niche situations. Besides that though, yeah, just not that great. So unfortunately, Tamaki should go in the Tamaki section. Next we have a second Tamaki. I'm going to put him in the recently power crept. So you could argue that, or maybe Schneizel tier. You know what, I'm putting the Schneizel tier, my bad. Because he is very good with the Black Knights, but only with the Black Knights. Outside of that, not that useful. But within that faction, yeah, he's pretty powerful given all the characters they have to buff them, including Zero, Rakshata, and Taizo. So putting that together, I think this Tamaki is best used within the Black Knight faction and probably nothing else. Next we have is Minami, and of course Tamaki. I think I'll put him... No, that's fine. He's pretty bad. No, that's not true. He's better than Tamaki. My bad. Wait, I'm sorry. This is Minami? Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. Power creep. I don't know why I put him in the Tamaki section. It's power creep because Minami is an anti-air pilot for the Black Knight faction, and while he's very good at that, the recent release of really powerful Nightmare Frame pilots with high range attack power, well, not recent because we've gotten some in the past, but all of those may not have an ability where they specifically do extra damage against airships like Minami, but the attack power compensates for it, which is why Minami has been power crept. I suppose if you're just starting out, you can go for him, but yeah, they've kind of made him almost useless at this point. So I definitely think he belongs in the power crept tier. Next we have is Kento, garbage, definitely so far the worst of the worst at this point. Next we have is Tohdoh, I'm gonna put him in these solid staples. I don't know why I said substitute, staples. And I think, yeah, he's probably worse than Lelouch, but not by much. Very solid defender, high health, high defense, attack power is kind of low, but as a defender, still one of the best in the game for sure. So A tier is appropriate. Next we have is Nagisa. I'm gonna put her in the Schneizel tier, but definitely above Tamaki. Really good for the JLF faction, a cost increaser that also costs 0 and reduces the cost of all the JLF members. I've said cost like 1,000 times, but if you watch this tier list enough times, you know what Nagisa does and you know why she's very good, but only in her faction, and she's not as game breaking as other characters that would go in the A tier, so I think the C tier is appropriate. Next we have is Asahina, and I want to say power creep or garbage. I'm going to put him in the garbage, but I'll put him high garbage though, because I think he's not terrible. But yeah, among all the JLF members, he is definitely the worst. So yeah, garbage. Nishi's only, no, I think garbage is appropriate. Next we have is Senba, solid substitute, definitely better than Kallen. One of the best defensive pilots in the game. I've said 1,000 times. The self-healing ability combined with the high defense and health makes him really good, which gives him great durability and definitely belongs in the B tier. Next we have is Urabe, also a solid substitute, and is he better than Kallen? Ooh, that is a tough one. I don't know. I don't know. They're like neck and neck. I'll put him above Kallen, I guess, because he has his own self buffs when it comes to defense and attack power. Well, not defense, action speed, where Kallen does not. But Kallen has more base attack power, so it's very difficult. I go back and forth with that, but they're both kind of neck and neck in the solid substitute option for characters like Cornelia and Bismarck. Moving on, we have Suzaku, easy S rank, one of the best pilots in the game for sure. High attack power, both melee and range, makes any Nightmare Frame skill gauge 100% when deployed, gives himself a barrier, just a very unique pilot. Oh, and a faster deployment time too, of course. So it's just like so many awesome things with this pilot. Definitely belongs in the S tier. So good. Next we have is Kaguya, and niche use only, definitely worse than C2 for sure. Next we have is Diethard, A tier. Cloaking is always going to be useful in this game, so because of that, Diethard will always be useful, and I think putting him below Tohdoh makes sense, so A tier would work. Next we have is Rakshata, A tier. I'm going to put her, this is so difficult, but I'm going to say above Tohdoh because her cost reduction and attack power increase for everyone the Black Knights is so damn good. One of the best faction supports in the game, which I don't think anyone can deny, so I think A tier is appropriate. Next we have is Suzaku, and I'm going to put him in the budget substitute for other defensive pilots in the game. I would say he's definitely, this is hard, I'll say above Urabe, but not better than Senba. These two though are really neck and neck because Zaku has more attack power than say Senba, but Senba is a better wall because he can heal himself. Zaku doesn't heal himself, he just nullifies melee damage, which is still useful, but not the same. And of course, Senba has better overall stats as a defensive pilot, so I guess it depends on what you value more, either high melee attack or better defensive stats, basically durability. And I think durability is overall better, so Suzaku is probably worse than Senba, but again, it's up to your interpretation of what you think is better. Okay, next we have is Suzaku. And this is the first one, by the way. I'm going to put him in the A tier, high A tier though. I've been putting him in S tier for a while now, but I think it's finally time that he goes into the A tier. While he does have balanced attack stats and is of course a very good cost increaser with low deployment cost, I just think there are so many better options in the game that I can't justify putting him in the A tier, not A tier, sorry, S tier anymore. So therefore, he belongs in the A tier, but still one of the best pilots in the game for sure. Next we have is Charles. Talk about going from good to crap. Definitely garbage tier. I put him below the other pilots. He's just so bad. His effect is just, not that great. Charles really sucks. Moving on, we have Schneizel, and of course he goes in his own tier list because he's the reason why it exists. He is a quintessential example of a character who has a ability, but only for his faction, but the ability itself is not that great. So yeah, Schneizel is in the Schneizel tier, obviously. Next we have is Cornelia, definitely S tier, and I'm going to put her above Suzaku because again, one of the best attackers in the game, boosts the attack power of every other pilot that's currently deployed, good stats for a Annihilator, just really awesome stuff. Cornelia is just the best, and of course S tier is appropriate. Next we have is Euphy, niche use only. I'm going to put her, I'll say above Kaguya, but below C2, because the push ability is not, it's push ability is not that great, but in certain situations it's very good, and so I can see her being useful in more situations than Kaguya, where all Kaguya does is give you a defensive buff, which yes, that's good. Actually, it's a damage reduction, not defensive buff, damage reduction, which it's kind of the same thing. Point is, pushing enemies out of the way, especially with so many maps now that have holes in the ground, seems way more useful than just damage reduction. But I will say that C2's barriers are overall way better, so I think slotting her between the two of them makes sense. Moving on, we have Villetta. I'm going to put her in the S tier, at least for now. She will be power crept in the future, but in this moment, at this time, she is definitely S tier, but definitely below Suzaku and Cornelia. But she has really high range attack power. She heals everyone in range, gives herself a barrier, so S tier for sure for Villetta. Plus that costume gives her a couple extra points, which is just damn, that art is so good. Moving on, we have Clovis, niche use only. I'll put him above Euphy because a speed boost is always something you might want to consider using, unlike the other ones below him. Next we have is Millie, and she's still S tier in my opinion. Still one of the best healers in the game, if not the best healer in the game, and that cost reduction to all Ashford units is still really solid. What else can I say about Millie? She's just really good. Very simple effects, but man, are they really effective. Next is Millie. I'm going to put her in the Schneizel tier, but definitely above. Is she a better Schneizel? Yeah, I guess so. She's a better Schneizel because her cost reduction is for everyone in the Ashford faction, unlike Nagisa, who only gives a cost reduction to just the JLF members. I cannot speak English.
Obviously.
But anyways, that's why Millie's really good and therefore belongs in the C tier, but like high C tier. Also, she costs nothing to deploy when fully upgraded, but you guys already know that, and she's a cost increaser, so good stuff all around. Next we have is Shirley. Gonna put her in the A tier, and I think she's probably above Tohdoh, but worse than Rakshata. Yeah, I'm going to put her there. Really good healer, good balance attack stats for range and melee, and has a good healing ability that goes along with the fact that she just heals passively as a healer. A tier all the way. Next we have the second Shirley, also niche use only. I'll put her... I guess I'll put her above Euphy because attack increase could be more useful than simply pushing enemies into a hole. Next we have is Toru. Yeah, he's pretty bad. Garbage. Next is Suit C.C. Gonna put her above Millie in the S tier until we get the defensive C.C., which is not for quite a while. I don't see this character coming off the S tier unless something crazy happens because again, passive cost increaser, heals herself, and has really good stats. So yeah, there's no reason not to have her in the S tier. Still one of the best pilots in the game for sure. Next we have is Rivalz, who, yeah, Tamaki tier. Easy cost increaser, sure. I guess in some cases he's good with the Ashford faction, but even then, you have to really be desperate to use this guy. And hey, I've been, so I guess I'm just as bad, I suppose. But yeah, garbage tier. Next we have is the original Kallen, the defensive Kallen, and S tier for sure. I'm going to put her Damn, this is really hard. I'll put her after Suzaku though, because her immortality ability combined with her high attack power and solid defensive stats make her such a good pilot and still one of the most broken characters in the game, and therefore still S tier, even though it's been months since she came out, which is a testament to how good she is. Next we have is Nina. I'm gonna put her in the Schneizel tier, but I'll put her, after Tamaki, because she's just a cost reducer. I'm about to say increaser, I wish. Cost reducer for the Ashford faction. So really good in certain situations, but yeah, I would say probably the lower tier. Next is Naomi. Gonna put her in the Schneizel tier, probably above. Yeah, I think that's fine, above Tamaki and Nina, because she's the only healer for the Black Knight faction. So if you're doing those Britannian faction wars, well, I say Britannian, Black Knight faction battles, then she's your only option. So until we get the other ones down the road, this is all you have. So therefore, Schneizel tier. Moving on, we have Euphemia, easy S tier. I'll put her above, ooh, man, that's hard. I'll put her above 0C2. I keep going back and forth with these three. I don't know. I guess Euphy's pure healing ability is better than Millie's, but Millie does more for you for the Ashford faction, so kind of depends what you value more.
You are disgusting. What is wrong with you?
But as a pure healer, Euphy is definitely one of the best in the game, so S tier above Millie. Just wait till my next tier list where I swap it again, because I have no idea half the time. Just depends how I feel at the moment. Next we have is Nunnally. Not worth it. Gonna put her above Ohgi, but yeah, not worth it. There's just so many better options in the game, especially budget options for Ashford Academy, so why would you level her up? I don't get it. Her effects are just not worth it. Next we have a Suzaku, also not worth it. I'll put her above Ohgi. It's the same deal. Good ability in theory, but in practice, it just never worked out, so. And now we got Villetta, so we don't need her. We got a better sub healer. So sorry Suzaku, but yeah, just not worth it. Next we have is Halloween Jeremiah, and as much as I love this character, and I really do, he's really niche use only. Most of the time he's not that relevant. His effects are fantastic, good for faction stuff, but most of the time dealing damage on deployment and only dealing damage is not that useful. It's good in arena mode. If this was an arena mode tier list, he'd be like S tier, but it's not. So in all fairness, I gotta put him in the niche use only. You could argue Schneizel tier, but is a cost reduction enough to get him there? I mean, we do have Nina. All right, fair enough. I'll put him in the Schneizel tier. That actually makes sense. And I'll put him probably above Nagisa, just because he supports the Halloween faction, which is really broken. And Nagisa supports the JLF, which does have more members, but at this point in the game, the Halloween faction is superior, and therefore Jeremiah is more useful than Nagisa. Next we have is the other Jeremiah. I'm going to put him in the S tier right above Suzaku, because the cost increase on deployment, it's just so damn useful that I can't justify, or I should say, I couldn't imagine him being any lower at this point. We only have one other cost increaser in the game upon deployment, and she's not as good as this Jeremiah. Now in the future, he will be power crept, but we are not even close to those times. So until then, this Jeremiah definitely belongs in the S tier. Next we have is Halloween Lelouch, and of course he's garbage, right? The worst of the worst. I'm just kidding. He belongs in the S tier. It literally is named after him, so of course he is the best of the best. Fast redeployment time, high attack power, increases his simultaneous attacks, and cloaks everyone in range continually. Absolute madness, one of the best characters in the game ever. Not just for this period in time, but just in general. What an incredible character. And just like I said in my video, I don't think the creators realized how broken this Lelouch was when they first made him, but wow, that's all I gotta say. Just wow.
The GOAT!
Next we have is Villetta, and yeah, she's in the Solitude section. I didn't think it'd take this long. I mean, this long, I suppose, but this fast rather. But she's a solid substitute now. She's no longer the best Annihilator in the game, not even close. So I'm gonna put her probably high solid substitute. But yeah, there's just so many better options. So yeah, it's kind of fortunate. But hey, that's how the cookie crumbles. She's now in the B tier. Next is Lloyd. I'm gonna put him in the niche use only. Probably, yeah, that's fine, because I think barriers are more useful than increasing the skill gauge by 100%. You know what? I take that back. I'll put him above C2. most of the time you don't need this ability, but man, when you do though, it's good to have Lloyd on your team. So I think high niche use only is very appropriate for him. Next we have is Kewell, recently power crap. I'll put him above Minami though. Same deal, high attack power relatively speaking, does extra damage to flying enemies, but nowadays that's just not that useful. And when it becomes relevant again, there will be better pilots with better effects that target flying enemies that you still wouldn't use Kewell or Minami in most cases. I have seen certain Japanese players use them, but 90% of the time, yeah, they've been power crapped. So I guess it depends, but I think they have been. Next is Kewell, Halloween Kewell. I'm going to put him in the Schneizel faction, probably above Nagisa. Yeah, above Nagisa makes sense. The thing is about this Kewell is that he's not a bad budget option for a defensive pilot, but the problem is there are just better options available to you. So the only real reason why you'd ever use him is for the Britannian faction battles, and for those, he's not bad. I wish they had lowered his melee attack and increased his durability, but whatever, this is the pilot we got, and he's okay. Which is why I think he belongs in the Schneizel tier.
Which is a shame.
Next we have is Lloyd. Gonna put him in the Schneizel tier above Nagisa because I think there are overall better options now in the Special Corps where his cost reduction is far more useful than Nagisa's for the JLF, because we have the 2 rank 4 Suzakus, the rank 3 Suzaku, and the 2 Ceciles. So yeah, the Special Corps is actually better than JLF, so therefore Lloyd is more useful, so I think he ranks higher than Nagisa, but definitely worse than everyone else on this list. Next is Cecile, and same deal as before, although I'm going to put her above Jeremiah because her abilities impact or affect all Britannian forces, and she reduces the redeployment time of all pilots in your team. So because of that, she has more usability. So I'll definitely put her in the Schneizel tier, but high Schneizel tier. Next we have is Bartley, garbage. God, he's awful. Then we have, what is this, Darlton. Yeah, recently power crept, high power crept, but recently power crept. The problem with Darlton is he has high durability, but low attack power, and there's just so many better options now in the game that I can't justify putting him any higher than the, what is this, the D tier? Yeah, he belongs in the D tier. Sorry, Darlton, rest in pepperoni, but yeah, power crept. Next is Guilford. Gonna put him in the solids with substitutes. Can't speak English.
Now you better get your act together, young man.
Next is Guilford. Gonna put him in the solid substitute section. Probably, this is difficult. Probably above Suzaku. Because the thing about this Guilford is that while his attack power is garbage, he actually has pretty good high defense and of course health. So he's a very good cost increaser and kind of like a nice wall to have on your team. So I think the B tier is appropriate and definitely that high. And his deployment cost becomes 0 when fully upgraded, like Nagisa and Millie. Moving on, we have the other Guilford, and I'm gonna put him in the not worth it, but high not worth it. Yes, his abilities are not bad, where he boosts his defense every time he destroys enemy pilots, but it's such a very strange fact because you think it would boost the attack power, but they gave him like defensive stats for an Annihilator, so a lot of contradictions there. Definitely one of the worst pilots in the game, but I can't deny the fact that in certain cases he could be useful, but most of the time though, not that great. Plus, I just can't stand that art, so a lot of bias in this one. Next we have is Villetta, and I don't know where to put this character because a healer with high melee attack power is always very difficult to use. It's not always applicable, so niche use only would be appropriate. But I know I have Shirley in the A tier, so Villetta probably should go there as well. I'll put her below Diethard though, because while she is a good melee healer, the problem is her abilities are not as good as Shirley's. The skill gauge increase combos really well with Gino's Tristan, which I kind of like, but most of the time she's just not that great. But as a melee healer, I guess putting her below A tier wouldn't make any sense, so A tier it is. Okay, next is Zero Lelouch. I'll put him above Jeremiah. I don't think he's as good as these three above him, but he's still very solid. As I said before, he does so much for you, does damage upon deployment, his skill gauge goes to 100% on deployment for the first time only, and he boosts the attack power of everyone in the Black Knights. Swiss Army knife, just like Halloween Lelouch, but obviously worse than Halloween Lelouch, so therefore he belongs in the S tier, but like below the other two. Still really good stuff. Next we have is Millie. This is the Ashford one, and niche use only. I'll put her below Euphy because the cost reduction for Euphy makes up for hers, where Millie doesn't have one. Next is Cecile Crewman. Gonna put her in the A tier, but where to put her?
Still debatable.
My biases are really impacting my judgment. I guess I'll put her. No, she's better than Rakshata. I'll put her above Rakshata. And the reason why is because, yeah, she's a cost increaser, but the secondary ability is also really good, very underrated. So therefore, I think her being above Rakshata makes sense. And yes, my biases are obviously playing a role here, so just deal with it, I suppose. Next is Kallen. This is the summer count. I'm going to put her above Nagisa? No, I'll put her above Naomi. A good healer with good balanced attack stats, but her main effect only works on 2 other pilots in the game, and so that's not that great, even though those 2 pilots are very solid. I think C tier is appropriate, and this location kind of works for me. Next we have is Bradley. Good to put him in the budget substitute option, and I'll put him above Urabe and Kallen. The problem with Bradley is while he's got really high attack power, his durability is really bad. But he does have high attack power, and I have to respect that by putting him above other characters with slightly lower attack power. So yeah, I'd say B tier. He was good at one point, but ultimately his durability just makes him sometimes unusable. Next we have his Bedtime Lelouch. Definitely not worth it. I'll put him high not worth it, but yeah, just not worth it. It's basically a win more, I don't know, I guess in the Royal Family faction, which is going to come out, almost a year from now, he'll be good, but until then, yeah, just not worth it. Butler Lelouch, going to put him in the recently power crept, but he's high power crept. He's still really solid. There's just so many juggernauts in the game that I just can't justify putting him in the A tier anymore, so I think this is most appropriate. Could you put him in solid substitutes? I suppose, but I feel like if Villetta is in the B tier, you can't put Lelouch in the B tier. That doesn't make any sense. So I think D tier is most appropriate, which is a shame because he's still a really good character, but that low attack power is finally starting to catch up to him. Next we have is C2 in Lelouch's clothing. Definitely A tier. I will put her above Tohdoh. No, I'll put her above Shirley because she's basically a defensive pilot and an Annihilator in one really nice package. So because of that, I think A tier is very appropriate, and especially in this location. Next we have is Summer C2, also putting her in A tier. I'll put her above Suzaku. That doesn't make any sense. I'll put her above Lelouch. No, makes no sense. I'll put her above Cecile. Okay, that works. Really high attack power, simultaneous attacks, pretty good intervals as well, but again, not the best range attacker in the game, and so therefore I feel like she can't be in the S tier anymore, so I think A tier is appropriate. Really good stuff though. I like her character a lot, but man, she got power crept. It finally happened. Moving on, we have defensive Kallen, definitely S tier, and I'm going to put her above Lelouch, and the reason why is because her defensive increase ability is the only thing she does. Well, she does other things, but that's like the main thing. That applies to everybody, and therefore this Kallen's always useful, regardless of what factions you're using, unlike Zero, who's mostly catered to the Britannia, the Black Knights faction. So I think Kallen from that standpoint is better. Plus her high attack and defense stats are still some of the best in the game. And I of course am referring to the Japanese as well. So I'm going to put her above Zero, but honestly you can go back and forth with this. I don't think people are going to like that, but whatever. I think Kallen's really good, and I'm appreciating her more and more on my Japanese account. So therefore I think she belongs in the S tier. Next we have is Millie, and I'm going to put her in the Schneizel faction just because she has a cost reduction for the Maid Cafe event. I'm going to put her below Kallen because the maid characters are now worse than the summers, so therefore Millie's not as good as Kallen in theory because she works with those pilots like Kallen worked for the summer ones, and therefore I feel like Millie's just not as good. Next is Maid Shirley. I'm going to put her above Rakshata because I think now in the game, especially since we just got Villetta and Halloween Lelouch, I can't justify putting Maid Shirley in a category among those powerhouses. So therefore, I think A tier is appropriate. Her healing ability is still really powerful, but I feel like she's not as good as she used to be. So A tier, I think works. Next is Guilford, gonna put him below Tohdoh. I just think he's a worse Kallen, but he's still a very good defensive pilot. So I think A tier is appropriate. Moving on, we have Tamaki? Sorry, this is Gino. I'm an idiot. Gino. I'm going to put him in the S tier, of course. Probably above, yeah, this is hard, above defensive Kallen. What makes Gino so good is that he has such balanced stats between health, attack, defense, and of course he's a great cost increaser, arguably the best one in the game, and he's so broken in the Tristan, so yeah, he's definitely one of the best in the game, definitely belongs in the S tier for sure. Then we have Anya, also S tier, gonna put her probably above Villetta, because she has really high attack power, but compared to the other characters here, yeah, she's not better than them, but still one of the best range attackers in the game and has a really solid decloaking ability, which is now more relevant than ever because Halloween Lelouch is going to be a staple in arena mode for pretty much forever. So if you got Anya, consider yourself very lucky. Next is Bismarck Waldstein, the Giga Chad. I'm going to put him in the A tier. High A tier though. I can't justify S tier because he's kind of hard to use with that high cost. But what makes him great is he's... Wow,
Every thing! Jesus Christ!
This just isn't your day.
Okay, next we have is Bismarck Waldstein. Gonna put him in the A tier. I can't put him in the S tier because of his high deployment cost. But besides that, this guy's an absolute juggernaut. I was using him in some of the extra missions recently, and he one-shots even like Cornelia and Suzaku. Really powerful, a boss killer. He's so broken with the Galahad, just a powerful character, and of course the Giga Chad. So obviously he belongs in the A tier. One of my favorite characters in the game and in the TV series. So yeah, A tier for sure. Next we have is the new Kallen we got. Well, she's not new anymore, but still, the one with the Gurren. Not worth it, but I'll put her above the other ones. I don't know what they were thinking with this character. She doesn't really do anything that well. Yeah, more attacks with the Gurren. Okay, so what? But like, they gave her defensive abilities when she's an Annihilator, and she should be more focused on annihilating, so give her higher attack power and the ability to boost her own attack. They made some weird choices with this character, so therefore I can't justify putting her any higher than this. She's just not worth it. Next is Nautic. Gonna put her in the Schneizel tier, probably above Jeremiah, just because she affects all members of the Knights of the Round, and collectively, that's one of the best factions in the game. At least the sub-factions would be a better way to put it. So yeah, I'll put her in C tier. Really good stuff. My only problem with Nautic is the fact that she has really low attack power, but the speed boost kind of makes up for it, and increasing someone's attack power above her is not bad either. A really good support character, which is annoying because that's not who Nautic is in the manga. Not going over that crap again, you already know how I feel, so
That's garbage. That's total garbage.
anyway, C tier for Nautic. Next we have is Jeremiah. This is the one from Narita. Gonna put him, I guess, worse than Bedtime Lelouch? I'll say better, I suppose. It's the same deal. Every time he destroys an enemy nightmare frame, he will increase your cost. And so you might be thinking that's not bad, but
No, it's not bad, but it's not great either, is it?
just not worth it. Most of the time, you can just use basic cost increasers or pilots like Jeremiah to get the same job done. Not this one, by the way, the first one. You already knew that. But hey, just clarifying if I wasn't being clear. The point is, this Jeremiah is not that great. In theory, he would have been, but yeah, kind of meh. I think it's funny how both of these pilots from the same banner are in the not worth it category. Makes you think. Moving on, we have is Taizo. I'm going to put him in the A tier, one of the best faction support pilots, period. And due to that, I'm going to put him, believe it or not, I'm going to put him above C2 because what he does for the Black Knights is just insane. That speed increase, so simple of an ability, but man, it pays off in such dividends. It really makes everyone so much better as a result. And now we have Halloween Lelouch. Taizo's even better, if you can believe that. So yeah, he's just a fantastic character. Moving on, we have Diethard. Oh god, he's so bad. Worst in the game in my opinion. Just absolute garbage. So G tier. Then we have Ashford Lelouch. This is like the rank 2 one. And I'll say niche use only, but low niche use only. Because you're only going to use him in the faction wars. But okay, I'll put him in the Schneizel tier. But low end Schneizel tier. No, that's not true. I'll put him better. He's better than Nina. But that's about it though. This character is just not that great. The ability to increase the defense is random as heck. And the attack power, while pretty good for rank 2, is, yeah, just not acceptable by today's means. It's kind of weird how I have him ranked above Butler Lelouch when that's not how anything should be, but whatever, that's the nature of the tier list. I'll have to rethink about this going forward. Moving on, we have is, what is this, Monica, and a solid substitute. I'll put her above Guilford. You know, 800 attack power is pretty good, cloaks herself, and she has a fast redeployment time. Can't block though, but hey, not a big deal. Really good stuff. Next we have is Dorothea. Gonna put her in the niche use only. Probably, I guess, like, I think better than Shirley, because the ability to increase the skill gauge by, I think it's 50%, is not terrible, but you gotta use her with the plummets to get that effect, which is garbage. So yeah, Dorothea, what did they do to you? What did they do to you? Anyhow, moving on, we have Shirley. Gonna put her in the A tier. This is the healing one, and I like her, but I think she's worse than the other one, so I'll put her right below that Shirley. She's more focused on preventing damage as opposed to healing, which I mean, I guess that's okay, but from my standpoint, I would prefer just to be better healing in this case. Because unlike Millie, who does so much for the faction, this Shirley only really affects the pilot next to her, so it's not as impactful. And therefore, A tier and definitely below the rank 3 Shirley. Next we have is Cornelia, and oh my god, definitely S tier, just for the art alone. Alright, let's put that aside there. Yeah, she's fantastic. A cost increaser on deployment right now in the game is definitely going to get you an S tier. Now, where to put her, that is a difficult question because, yeah, you know what? I think her spot here is actually good. That was kind of random, but yeah, I think that works just fine because her secondary ability is not that great, but the first one is, and I think Millie's definitely better. I think everyone on this tier list, well, everyone in this tier rather, is better than Cornelia. So S tier for sure, and definitely in this spot. And last but not least, we have B-Day Lelouch, who definitely belongs in, I'm going to put him in the Schneizel tier, but I'll put him high Schneizel tier because he's an excellent support for the Ashford faction. Is he like on the level of like a Rakshata or Taizo? Very debatable. I can see some people saying he should be in the A tier, but I don't know. I don't think he's that great. So C tier for me, but you could argue A tier. Just depends on, I guess, your perspective, if you will. But yeah, that's a tier list. Let me do something really cool here by I'm going to zoom out one more time just so you can see the full picture, because some people might want to see, hey, what does it look like at the end? So there you go. Now, I did talk quite a lot about the Halloween banner, you know, the Nightmare Before Christmas, which you can learn about right here. And here's a tier list of all the banners in the game. Go watch these videos right now.